Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei and Raynare change their mind and stay couple part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Belial the Liar for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. Would you go out with me? The question rang in Isay's ears. Was this actually happening? A cute girl was asking him out. This had to be a dream, right? There's no way in hell a girl this cute would ask out a nobody like him. Isay pinched himself. Nope, not a dream. A prank or a dare, then. Of course. Isay had almost let himself forget. Some girls used ask out our school's biggest loser as a rite of passage. That had to be what this is. Look, I'm sorry your friends forced you to do this, but don't tease me, okay? It's hard enough to just be lonely. Sorry you wasted your time. Isay moved to walk past the girl on the bridge. Raynare was shocked. Isay was seriously so sad that he automatically assumed she was being forced to do this. Well, she was, but that's not the point. Even if her goal was to kill him, it made her sad for him. Forced? What makes you say that? She asked, stepping in front of him. He sighed and resigned himself to humiliation. Even if it was just a joke at his expense, he was happy it was a cute girl. No one asks out a huge loser just cuz. Especially not a cute girl like you. Don't do this to me, he said, bracing for the moment when her friends would jump out of a bush or something with cameras, like every other time. He thinks I'm cute. Raynare blushed, despite herself. Even with her mission, she couldn't help feeling drawn to the boy. He was obviously depressed, and someone like him wouldn't have a soul in the world to confide in. Once again, she felt a pang of sadness for him. I'm being serious, Highway, please, if you have an ounce of mercy in your soul, please don't do this to me, please. She was beyond surprised. He had a tear in his eye. Who hurt this boy so much? He was begging, pleading for her not to break his heart. They'd known each other for less than 5 minutes and already he was terrified she'd toy with him. Just what in the world had happened to Issei? His face was pointed at the ground and tears fell from his eyes. Issei, look at me. Look. At. Me. She said, gesturing to her eyes. Slowly, with all the fear of a beaten dog, he did. He looked her in the eye. She saw how scared he was. He's terrified. She thought to herself. He is absolutely terrified that I'm going to hurt him. And, for some reason, so am I. Raynare looked him right in his scared eyes and said, Issei, I am asking you out for me and me alone. Whether or not you believe me is up to you, but I really hope that you'll say yes. She started off confident and assured, but as his face slowly started to fill with hope, she lost her momentum. She was guilty. Fallen angels were sinful creatures. By their very nature, they didn't often feel guilt. But Raynare, in that moment, felt worse than she had in her entire existence, even worse than when she fell. She was asking for his trust, for his hope, and her sole intention was to murder him. She was ashamed, but nevertheless, she continued. Please, Hidu-kun. She said, desperately. Issei sighed again. He glanced around, seemingly looking for something, and his hopeful expression fell once again into despair. Thanks, but no thanks. He said. You can tell your friends I said no. Again, sorry to waste your time. He pointed towards a rustling bush where the distinct shape of 2 humans stuck out like a sore thumb. No, Isay, wait. Leaving Raynare standing there, Isay walked off the bridge and went home. She didn't know it, but he'd cried tonight. She'd been right on the money when she guessed he was depressed. Raynare walked to the bushes where he'd claimed to see her friends hiding. Surely enough, Raynare and Mitlet were there, both with solemn faces. That could have gone better, Raynare said. That poor boy, Mitlet mumbled. No one present really wanted to kill the boy, but orders were orders, and Kakabiel was clear on his. Do not allow this boy to awaken his sacred gear. Kill him before that happens. Those had been his exact words. The plan was easy and only required one person other than Isay. Raynare. Raynare would ask him out, go on a date with him, and then at the end of the day, when he was comfortable and feeling secure, she'd kill him. But, little did they know, Isay was damaged goods. He'd probably never trust a girl again, much less a cute one asking him out on a date for no good reason. Their plan was doomed to fail. What are you two doing here? I had that under control. Raynare yelled at them angrily. She didn't, in fact, but she might have gotten somewhere if he hadn't seen them. Oh well. My ass, you did. He was terrified of you. Probably reminded him of something gnarly. Maybe he got tricked into pulling his pants down in front of the school. Raynare suggested. Raynare sighed, defeated. No, she definitely hadn't had that under control. Truth be told, she barely had herself under control. The pure sadness radiating off of Issei was almost enough to have her call the whole mission off and leave him alone. Almost. No, she'd felt sad and guilty for what she was doing, but she wasn't about to risk Akabiel's wrath for some kid. Or so she thought. It was the next day, at school. The lunch bell rang. Issei packed his bag, stood, and left the class. He didn't speak to anyone, and he tried not to look anyone in the eye. Looking people in the eyes only made them more likely to pick on him. See, Isay was an average guy. He wasn't super smart, wasn't athletic, couldn't smoothly talk to anyone, and he definitely wasn't gorgeous. So, people tended to overlook him. He had absolutely no defining traits. Though, for some reason or another, kids liked to bully him. Every day since he was a small child, he'd been picked on and pushed around. Today, he thought, would be no different. He was wrong. It started off just like it normally does. His parents gave him money for lunch, and naturally, the school bully smelled it on him. So, he'd ambushed Issei outside where everyone could see, right in the middle of the school courtyard. Even people on the road passing by could see the spectacle. "Come on, Mitsuda, don't take my money, man." Issei was rewarded for the statement with a punch to the gut, knocking him to the ground. "Don't talk to me like we're friends, chump. Now shut up and do what I say, or else." Issei sighed. It was always the same. "Bark like a dog. Bark like a dog." Mitsuda yelled at him. Issei did. Would, woof. "What kind of bark was that?" he'd say. "What kind of bark was that?" So Issei would be woof, woof. By this point, kids would start to stare and laugh. Occasionally, the student council would reprimand Mitsuda, but today wasn't one of those lucky days, so Issei had to suffer. Just like always. "Now, roll over. Now roll over." Issei didn't. Issei was thinking. Why is it always me? Why am I the one who has to suffer for their sick kicks? Why do I have to be embarrassed and humiliated for them to be happy? I'm sick of it. Issei thought, fuming. "Boy, Mutt, are you listening? Roll over," I said. Mitsuda kicked Issei's face. Issei was ready. He grabbed Mitsuda's foot and yanked him off balance, causing the bald kid to fall to the ground. Issei jumped up and moved to kick him in the face. Unfortunately for Issei, justice doesn't always win. Issei had landed a lucky move, sure, but just the one. Because, as luck would have it, Mitsuda was a martial artist, and he was pissed. Mitsuda grabbed Issei's foot as he tried to kick and spun underneath him in a leg sweep, knocking Issei to the ground and disorienting him. Mitsuda used this time to stand up, crack his knuckles, and land a solid punch to Issei's face, knocking out a tooth. Issei crawled on the ground, trying in vain to get away. Mitsuda, who was absolutely enraged, followed close behind him, laughing. "You're pathetic, Haidu. You thought you'd get on over to me, huh? I can take on anyone in this school. You're nothing compared to me." He gloated, standing over Issei as he crawled on all fours. He kicked Issei mercilessly, in the ribs, in the groin, wherever he could get his foot, he kicked Issei. After a solid minute of torture, he leaned in close to Issei, who flinched at the proximity, and spit in Issei's face. Issei was defeated, mentally and physically. He dropped to the ground, giving up. None of the kids there knew it, but Issei was done. He'd completely quit. He had every intention to go home. And end his own life. Anything would be better than this. Even an eternity in hell, Issei thought, would be better than his current life. He would kill himself and make the problems go away. But then, his saving grace appeared. And she was not happy. There was a spectator to the violence in the schoolyard, one who didn't even attend the school there. She'd been passing the school when she saw an abnormal crowd and decided to investigate. Her name was Raynare, and she was pissed. All the kids that had formed a crowd around the two boys made way for her as she stormed up to Mitsuda. "Who the do you think you are?" Raynare yelled in his face. He snarled at her, angered at the intrusion. "I'm a alpha, bitch. How about I make you roll over, too, eh?" he said, looking at her. She'd had enough. Not only had she watched this boy ruthlessly bully his supposed classmate, whom she was supposed to have a crush on, but he'd had the audacity to imply he was above her. Absolutely not. Raynare, in the guise of a normal human teenager from a different school, picked up Mitsuda by his with one hand, shocking everyone present. His eyes went wide as he was literally hoisted into the air with extreme ease. Who are you? What are you? Please don't hurt me," he said as he writhed and struggled in Raynare's grip. She sneered at him. "Some alpha you are, to beat up the weak and then cower when someone stronger than you shows up. Pathetic." She threw him to the ground, hard. Then, she walked over to Isay, who was still groaning on the ground. He was face down, not looking up, but he was conscious and aware. She rolled him over and looked him in the eye. He looked like he'd lost all his will to survive. Issei was truly a husk of a person. Raynare is not a sentimental person. She's only had a few attachments to people, and never for long. She'd never, ever felt love or a broken heart. Not sadness or grief, not shame or anguish. But at that moment, when he looked up at her. Her heart broke. Issei, get up. I'll walk you to the infirmary. His eyes focused on hers. He began to tear up again, but he struggled to his feet with her help. He put his arm around her shoulders, supporting himself. She put her arm around his waist, and he leaned into her. They started to walk, but after a few steps, Raynare stopped. She slowly turned toward the crowd of kids watching them, careful not to hurt Isay. If any of you ever hurt my boyfriend ever again, there will be hell to pay. She said, looking them all in the eyes. None of the kids there knew why, but they felt like she was dead serious. She'd have no problems, not from them. Mitsuda, however, who was writhing on the ground, was a different story. He'd sworn vengeance. Issei and Raynare walked to the infirmary, slowly and carefully. Isay almost assuredly had broken ribs, and Raynare wanted to be careful not to cause him any extra pain. He'd suffered enough today, she decided. Once they got to the infirmary, the nurse looked him over and called an ambulance. It wasn't super urgent, but she wanted to move him without fear of damaging him any further, so a regular car wouldn't work. So, Isay lay in a stretcher on the ambulance, and Raynare sat beside him, holding his hand. He looked up at her with hope in his eyes. "Are you really this nice?" he said. He didn't know her name, so he just said you. She looked puzzled. I just mean, well, I've never known anyone who was nice to me, not for a long time." He stuttered out. Raynare's heart tore in two. This boy was truly wounded, deeper than she ever could have guessed. "Don't worry about that right now, Isay. Just know, I'm here for you. I really do want to be your girlfriend, you know," she said, trailing off at the end. "What am I doing?" she asked herself. "I'm supposed to kill him, not comfort him. What's happening to me? Why do I feel this way?" Raynare was truly confused. Her mission was simple as it gets, but it was by far her hardest yet. She was just inexplicably drawn to this boy, this poor boy. He was just so broken. It was almost like she wanted to try and fix him, but that couldn't be possible. She was a fallen angel, and he was just a lowly human, an insect to her kind. Isay's hand tightened around hers, grabbing her attention instantly. "You never told me your name," he croaked out. The pain medicine they gave him was obviously starting to work. She laughed, just a bit. He tilted his head in confusion. "Uma," she said. "Uma Mono." He nodded his head. He was beginning to fall asleep, she could tell. His head lolled and his eyes opened and closed slowly. "That's pretty, really, pretty evening glow, huh? I love it," he said, and his head fell back. He spoke no more. Raynare smiled, despite herself. She was falling for him. When Isay woke up, he felt groggy, like he'd been asleep far too long. His everything hurt, like he'd been in a car crash or something, but he couldn't remember where he'd gotten so hurt. Wait, no, it was coming back to him. He'd been beaten up, mercilessly. Time was worse than ever. Far worse, apparently. He was in the hospital. As he sat up and looked around, he saw that he was alone in the room. He briefly wondered who brought him here. His parents. Chances are, they wouldn't come. He wasn't the precious daughter they'd always wanted, and they couldn't care less what actually happened to him. If anything, they'd probably be pissed that they had to pay his hospital bill. No, even if his parents knew he was hurt, they wouldn't take the time to come here. So who was here with him? A teacher? No, not likely. A fellow student. Isay seriously doubted it. Then, it hit him. He felt stupid for forgetting. He'd been in an ambulance. The ambulance had brought him here. Wait. There had been someone else. Someone who rode with him in the ambulance. He remembered the warmth of a hand. Who was it? He flexed his hands, remembering the feel of her hand in his. Her. It was her, he knew that much. But he couldn't remember her name, not at all. It danced at the edge of his memories, right on the of his dot. He wanted to remember her name, but he couldn't. Tears threatened his eyes. Has it all been a dream? Surely not, surely no, God would be that cruel. To dream of someone so nice and then have it all come crashing down around him. His head fell back against a hard hospital bed with a thump. He hoped with everything in his soul that she was real. It couldn't have all been a dream, could it? Not her riding in the ambulance, not her holding his hand, not her saving him, it had to be real. Yes. It was real. He remembered, she asked him out just yesterday. He sighed in relief. But, if she rode here, where was she now? How long had he been asleep? He looked around. It was dark outside, and the only light in his room came from lights on machines and medical instruments. No one would be here at this hour, other than doctors and nurses. If the girl had been with him, she'd probably left hours ago. Isay examined himself, checking his injuries. Running a hand over his, the immediate and excruciating pain indicated that not only were his ribs hurt, they were probably broken. His legs were sore, and his head. He had bandages on his arms and there was an IV next to the bed, but not currently in him. He chuckled once, a dry, sad laugh. What was the point? Why had he been hurt like this? Over a few hundred yen of lunch money. Pathetic. How could someone care so little for a fellow human that they'd put him in the hospital over some spare change? The door to the room opened and an elderly female doctor stepped in. "Ah, you're awake. Good. That was some potent stuff they gave you, I wasn't sure how long you'd be out. My name is Dr. Lisa. Yes, before you ask, that's first name Lisa, last name Lisa. I fixed up your ribs for you. Nasty bit of business." Issei was completely blown away by the insane speed of the doctor's speech. She wasn't a native Japanese citizen, he could tell. She spoke good Japanese, but at such a high speed that he could barely understand. Yeah, sorry, I'm not exactly sure what's happened also, who's paying for this?" Issei asked, hesitant. The doctor, Lisa, put her up in the air, like she just thought of something brilliant. "Ah, yes. That was the beautiful young girl that came with you. She paid for all of your treatment and all of the things you'll need. She also told the police what happened and called your parents to let them know too. What a nice girl, You're lucky, young man." "Ah, to be young and in love," the doctor trailed off with a weird look on her face, like she was fantasizing something. "I in love. Hardly, I barely know her, you're right about her being nice, though." Issei mumbled. How in the world had she paid for all this? She must be rich. The doctor looked confused. "Barely know her? That can't be right, she said you were her boyfriend," she exclaimed. Issei blushed and looked down. He sighed. "I suppose I do owe her that much, don't I?" he murmured. "Owe her?" The doctor snapped her ass. "I think I see what's going on now. Okay, Issei. Listen up." The doctor crouched down by Issei's bed, looking him in the eyes. "If this girl likes you, she doesn't want you to be her boyfriend because you owe it to her. If she really does like you, she wants you to love her for being kind and generous. And cute. Can't forget cuteness. Don't you dare get her hopes up because you owe her, okay? Okay." The doctor stood back up, leaving Issei to think about her words. "Okay, I've got to go get someone. Don't go anywhere. I know, you're probably thinking I'm on a hospital bed, where am I going to go? But we get a bunch of people who try to run off with IVs and such still in their arms. Like this one black-haired boy, ugh. Such a handful. Be right back." The doctor left the room and closed the door behind her. Did the girl truly like him? Why? What was special about him that no one else had? He wasn't particularly good looking, he wasn't smart or athletic, no special talents, except one that she couldn't possibly know about. So why, then? Surely she wants something. But what? Issei couldn't figure it out. Before he had time to think about it more, the door burst open again. Dr. Lisa came in, with a suspicious smile on her face, like she knew something Issei didn't. "Oh Issei, there's someone here to see you." She stepped out of the doorway, and behind her. The girl. Issei's eyes widened. A weight lifted off his heart and mind. Despite knowing the contrary, he had still been worried that she was something his mind had made up, a figment of his imagination. She smiled at him, then practically sprinted over to his side. "Issei, I'm so glad you're alright. You were really banged up," she said, grabbing his hand and intertwining her ass with his. "Thank you," Issei said. She looked at him funny. The doctor left the room, winking at Isay on her way out. "Thank you for what?" His hand squeezed hers, like he was trying to keep her from running away. "For saving me, and for helping me, and for paying for me, and for not being mad at me," he said, looking down. He didn't stutter, not once. As he went on, Raynare started to blush. "What the hell? Why am I blushing?" He didn't even say anything bad. "What's happening to me, damn it? Why would I be mad at you, Isay?" Isay gulped, then continued talking. Truth be told, he was awful at talking to girls, and he had to think carefully about what he wanted to say. "Because I turned you down the other day, I'm really sorry, I was just Isay started stuttering and trailed off. Raynare tilted her head in confusion. "He's so cute." She was practically squealing in her head. Here he was in a hospital bed, hurt extremely badly, but he was apologizing to her. Just what, Isay? He looked away from her and blushed, like he was embarrassed to say what he was thinking, which he was. She rubbed circles on the back of his hand, enjoying the feel of his hand in hers. "Isay, even if you don't like me, I'm going to be there for you, so you might as well tell me what you're thinking. I mean it, you can tell me anything." His face burned at her words, and she'd be lying if she said she wasn't embarrassed either. "I was just scared," he said, almost too low for her to hear. Raynare couldn't contain herself. She was grinning so hard her face hurt, and her heart was like crazy. She felt giddy. "He's so adorable, I can hardly stand it. You know what? I'm just gonna go with it. I'll figure out the consequences later." She sat down next to him on the bed and hugged him softly, careful not to aggravate his wounds. He blushed even harder than he had before as the girl's head snuggled into his like it belonged there. Hey, what are you doing?" he asked, clearly astonished at the sudden contact. He'd already been frightened by her holding his hand, but to be hugged, he was scared beyond belief. In reality, he'd only been hugged a handful of times, and only as a child. He had no idea how to handle himself, so he just put his arms around her. Hey, this is going to sound really bad, but I can't remember your name. He sputtered, looking ashamed. She looked up at him. She was still smiling, which confused Issei. How do you smile at someone who just said they don't know who you are? It's Yuma, silly. Yuma Mono. Honestly, you even said you liked it. She said, faking a pout. It all came rushing back. He did say that, didn't he? Oh yeah, I remember now. Sorry about that. Stop saying sorry. It's all fine. She said, poking him in the dot. Sorry. I am mean, not sorry. No, wait ugh. He hung his head, embarrassed. Raynare started giggling. Her small giggles soon turned into full-blown laughter. Issei looked flustered, but soon enough he started laughing too. The door to the room slowly opened and Lisa stepped back into the room. Raynare stopped hugging Issei, but didn't let go of his hand or get off the bed. Instead, she sat beside him, waiting. Sorry to interrupt you two lovebirds, but I felt like we should probably discuss treatment and such. She pulled up a rolling chair and sat at the foot of Issei's bed, looking at a clipboard. MMHMM. Yep. Yes, that's that okay. Issei, I hereby sentence you to 1 week of doing nothing. Your ribs were only fractured a bit, with only minor injuries otherwise, so you won't be bedridden, but you definitely can't go to school. Your friend can bring you your work, so I don't expect you to slack. I'll get you some pills for the pain, and that's basically it. As long as you don't get hurt anymore, you'll be okay. Issei sighed in relief. He thought about it for a second, and his face fell again. So I'll have to go back to my house, huh? I guess it was inevitable, he said quietly, looking sad again. Raynare looked at him, puzzled. Did he not like his home? I wonder if he has abusive parents. That would explain a lot, actually. Maybe I'll pay them a visit. You're free to go, whenever you're ready. If you don't have a ride, I'll drive you to your house whenever you're ready. Issei looked at Raynare. Where will you go? He asked her. He was honestly worried that she wouldn't come with him. She looked back at him and smiled. I don't know yet. I don't need to go home, so I'm not sure. She was hinting at something, and Issei thought he knew what, so he asked. Would you like to, can you come with me? He asked, looking her in the eyes. She giggled again. Of course, silly. I thought you'd never ask. I'd love to meet your parents. Issei turned pale, like he was afraid. My parents aren't the best. He said, looking away. They do, don't they? They abuse him. Who could ever hurt such a sweet boy? Raynare thought to herself. Issei looked up at the doctor, who was back to scribbling something on the clipboard. I think I'm good to go, Lisa-san. She looked up from her drawing. Excellent. I'll go bring my car around to the front entrance. Yuma, dear, could you help him get there? Of course. Great. See you in a bit. She dashed out of the room. You know, for an older woman, she really moves quickly. Raynare said, watching her go. Yeah, I noticed that too. I guess I should get out of this bed. Issei sat up and moved to the edge of the bed, groaning as he did. Raynare was quick to put an arm around him and help him out of the bed. He stood on shaking legs and supported himself with an arm on the bed. You know what the best part about all of this is? He said to Raynare with a solemn look on his face. What? She asked him, curious. He smirked. That jerk never did get my lunch money. Raynare smiled, slowly at first, then not even a few seconds later, she was laughing her heart out. Issei was smiling too, happy he made her happy. As skittish and nervous as he was, he did have a sense of humor. His humor was rather dark, sure, but it definitely aligned well with Raynare's dark persona as a fallen angel. He didn't know that, of course, but it's true nonetheless. When she finally stopped laughing, she had tears at the edge of her eyes. Issei, let's get you out of here. Lean on me. She said, putting his arm around her and moving to support his weight. Thanks Yuma. For everything. He said, not stuttering even once. Of course, Issei. Now let's go, we don't want to keep her waiting. Together, they walked out of the hospital and onto the street in front, where Lisa was waiting with an SUV. Raynare didn't say anything about it, but on their way out, she took a peek at Lisa's clipboard. Hastily drawn on the first page was a sketch of Issei and Raynare with a heart around them. It made Raynare happy. Lisa drove with no music on, leaving the spacious car plenty quiet enough for conversation. Issei and Raynare sat close to each other, or rather, Issei tried to sit to one side in the backseat and Raynare moved as close as she could to him. He frowned at first, but relented soon after. The elderly doctor had a knowing smile on her face as she drove out of the parking lot. Issei wondered how she knew where to go, but figured it had something to do with his address, probably being easily accessible to a doctor. The drive itself was only about 15 minutes as the town they were in, Kuo, was relatively small. They drove the first few minutes in silence and Lisa had finally had enough. She spoke up. "So, how did you kids meet? And don't you dare tell me it was something cliché, like we ran into each other on the sidewalk either," she said, chuckling. Issei looked sheepish. Raynare was the next to speak. "I asked Issei out and he rejected me," she said, without even a second of hesitation. The car swerved slightly and went back on track. "Issei-kun, could it be that I misheard her? There's no way you rejected someone as amazing as Yuma-chan, right? Tell me I misheard her." Issei looked in the mirror and saw Lisa glaring at him. Ugh. No, she's right. I thought it was a prank, so I turned her down," he said, looking out the window. Lisa grunted in disapproval, like she didn't believe he could do something so stupid. She sighed. "Well, do you still think it was a prank? Answer wisely," Lisa said, narrowing her eyes. Raynare also looked at him expectantly. He blushed and didn't look directly at either of them. "I guess not," he murmured. Lisa started to laugh. You guess not. Watch it, Yuma-chan, he's a sharp one. Bahahaha. You're going to have a grand time trying to get anywhere with this one." Lisa cackled at his response. Raynare had a smile on her face. Raynare went to hold Issei's hand again. He stiffened momentarily, then calmed down and let her take his hand in hers. Lisa grinned again. "Well, I suppose there's hope for you yet. So, have you figured out where you're staying while you recover?" she asked Issei. He looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I'm staying at my house," I think he asked, not really getting what she meant. "Oh, my mistake. Looks like you haven't figured it out yet. I won't ruin your plan, Yuma-chan. Though, he's so dense you might have a hard time getting him to go along with it." She cackled again and Raynare looked down in embarrassment. Issei looked between the two of them rapidly, trying to figure out what was going on. What in the world were they talking about? Wasn't he staying with his parents? "I don't really understand what you're talking about," he said, still trying to figure out Raynare's plan, which was to have Issei stay with her so she could personally nurse him back to health. Lisa, with her years of experience, had guessed it within minutes, but it would take Issei a while. In fact, he'd probably be wherever Raynare wanted him before he realized she'd been planning it. Ho, don't worry about it. Just the ramblings of an old woman, darling. Now, which one is your house?" Issei looked out the window and sure enough, they were on his street. Raynare followed his gaze and Lisa slowed down so she wouldn't pass the house up. "The brown one with 2 stories, right there." He pointed out what was obviously the nicest house on the street. "Whoa, fancy. I didn't know you lived somewhere this nice, Issei. I'm happy you invited me over." He sighed at Raynare's comment. "It isn't as great as it looks," he said, downcast. Inwardly, Raynare was seething. His parents had to be some pieces of work if they made living in a place like this seem so awful. Lisa pulled the car into Issei's driveway and parked. She turned off the car and waited for Issei and Raynare to collect themselves. "Issei, dear, could you stay here for a second? I want to speak with you privately. No offense, Yuma-chan. Just gotta give him a little talking to," Lisa said, chuckling at the last bit. Raynare looked a bit taken aback, but complied. "I'll be waiting right outside the car, Issei. Yell if she tries any funny business." Raynare let go of Issei's hand and stepped out of the car, leaving him with the doctor. "So what did you want to talk about, Lisa-san?" The doctor sighed. "Issei, I want you to listen to me carefully, okay? No talking, just listen." Issei was kind of weirded out by how fast the doctor's attitude had changed from carefree to deadly serious, but he nodded in the affirmative. She sighed again and started talking. "I've seen the symptoms of depression before, Issei," she said solemnly. Issei's eyes widened in shock. How could she have known he was depressed? His parents didn't even know. He didn't say anything, though, per her request. She kept going. "Issei, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets any better. You're not going to understand a lot of what happens to you or why it happens, but you've just gotta keep trucking. The universe sometimes does things that don't make sense, and we've just gotta keep going and do the best we can, whenever we can. That's just how life is. No one knows what tomorrow holds, so make the best of today while you still can, otherwise you'll end up old like me and you won't even have realized it." She chuckled. "I do know one thing, though." She turned around to face him. "That girl outside this car is your chance. She's your one hope for some happiness at the moment. So don't do anything to mess things up with her," she said, poking him in the dot. Issei looked like a deer in headlights. He tried to form words in his, but he couldn't think of anything except for one glaring question. How will I know what to do?" he sputtered out. She had a sad smile on her face. "You won't, Issei. That's what makes living life so much fun. I'll give you some advice I wish someone would have given me when I was your age." listen up, I'll only say it once. She said, snapping her S in his face to make sure he was listening. He laughed, despite the situation. Here's the thing. We're all gonna die, eventually. Issei's face fell. Was that supposed to make him feel better? But, knowing that, would you rather waste your entire life being sad and second-guessing every word that comes out of your, or would you rather live every second of every day doing everything you can to make each and every one of your wildest dreams come true? I think I know what I'd say. Now, that girl out there is one of those dreams. Go take it. She said, and lightly slapped him on the dot. She turned back into her own seat. Right, now go tell her to trade places with you. I'm gonna give her a different talk. Maybe something about making BABIES. Lisa said, making Issei blush. He rushed to open the car door and Raynare helped him out. A few seconds later, Issei was outside leaning on the car while Raynare and Lisa sat inside. Lisa turned to look at Raynare with a stern glare. Uma. That boy out there is hurting, bad. He's obviously depressed, which I'm sure you noticed. His parents are abusive too, if what I'm guessing is correct. At the very least, they're negligent. He's broken right now. But you, she pointed a bony at Raynare, can fix him. What he needs right now more than anything is to be loved and cared for. To that boy, even if he doesn't know it yet, you're his saving grace, his shining light. If I had to guess, before you showed up, he'd been entertaining the idea of suicide. Raynare gasped. I knew he was sad, but suicide. She said softly. Lisa nodded gravely. I've seen it all before. They get it in their heads that nothing is worth living for, that even hell would be better than their current situation. Then, they take it into their own hands and make the choice. She said, shaking her head in sadness. Lisa then raised her head and Raynare could see the fire in her eyes. You can't let that happen. You are in the perfect position to save that boy and I think you know that. Raynare nodded softly and Lisa continued. So, what I need from you is this. Love that boy. I don't mean physically, it is hardly what he needs right now, I mean emotionally. Love him from when he gets up in the morning to when he goes to bed at night. If he needs a shoulder to cry on, give him yours. If he needs a pat on the back, you'd better hop to it. If he ever starts to think dying is better than living, then show him it's not. I think you'll find that he'll do more than return the favor. She paused for a second and leaned in close to Raynare. One might say you'll be his guardian angel. Lisa said with a grin. Raynare's eyes went wide with shock, but before she could react, she was forcefully ejected from the car by an unknown force. She stumbled out onto the driveway and Issei moved to catch her. Lisa's car sped off and she waved goodbye to the two teens. Who'd have thought that two totally different kinds of person would be so fundamentally perfect for each other? It made Lisa's old heart weep with joy. She chuckled to herself softly. It's gonna be rough for those two, but they'll pull through. Issei caught Raynare right before she fell onto the concrete. He caught her in such a way that it would have looked to the outside observer that they had just decided to start dancing the tango in the middle of the driveway at nighttime. Both of the teens blushed and Issei helped her back up. He was feeling much less pain than he had been earlier and he could walk on his own, but he still leaned on Raynare. She didn't mind. They walked up to the entrance of the house, but the lights were off. The door was unlocked, however, so Issei just opened it and let them in. No one was awake, or so it seemed from the emptiness of the room they entered, the living room. Issei wasn't surprised, though. His parents were normally in bed at about 9 or 10, and while he wasn't sure what time it was, he knew it was probably well past that. He turned to Raynare, who followed close behind him. We've got T2 guest rooms, you can pick one, if you'd like, he said. Or she replied. Raynare tilted her head and gestured for him to keep speaking. He was confused, but he kept going. Oh, or, I guess you could stay in MMIR room, he managed to say, stuttering slightly and blushing furiously. She blushed too. Even though that was what she wanted him to say, it was slightly embarrassing nonetheless. On the bright side, it was dark enough in the house that he couldn't see her blushing. I'd love to, Issei. Lead the way. Raynare said, not looking him in the eyes. Issei gulped, but he led the way to his room. He opened the door and let Raynare in. She looked around. Everything was neat and orderly, like he had way too much time on his hands and enjoyed cleaning. There was a king-size bed at the center of the room and a large couch at the foot of it. The bed had nightstands on both sides and there were two bookshelves in the room on opposite ends of one another, so you'd have to walk around the bed and to the other side of the room to go to the other shelf. Behind the bed, there was a large window and the full moon streamed in from the glass, highlighting the white walls and giving the whole room a white glow. There were 3 doors in Issei's room. The one they came in and 2 more. Raynare guessed they were probably a bathroom and closet. I'll sleep on the couch, so make yourself at home, he said quietly. Raynare inwardly squealed. He's so effing cute. How naive and innocent and adorable this boy is. It made her want to just pick him up in her arms and twirl him around and never let go. He excused himself to the bathroom to get changed into his pajamas and out of his hospital smock. So, Raynare planned a little surprise for him. Issei stepped into the bathroom and immediately almost fell over. He propped himself up on the sink and he started to breathe heavily. "There's a girl in my room. There's a gorgeous, beautiful, awesome, amazing girl in my room." He was acting like he normally did on the outside, but truth be told, being near a girl for so long was weighing on him, mentally. He knew that no matter what, he wouldn't be getting any sleep tonight. He had never been near a girl he trusted, not for years, since when his grandmother died. This was tearing away at his mental state and his brain kept barking at him to stop getting close to her, to stop letting himself trust her before it was too late. Nothing good came out of trusting anyone, ever. He couldn't let himself form an attachment. No, no, no. This is wrong. She saved me from Mitsuda and paid for my hospital visit. She's helped me and comforted me for this long, I at least owe her some trust, Issei whispered to himself, in the bathroom. Lisa's voice echoed in his mind. Don't you dare get her hopes up because you owe her, okay? Issei forced himself to calm down. He stopped breathing so hard and his pulse went down, slowly. He started whispering to himself again. No. I'm going to trust her. I'm going to let myself get close with her. And, if she turns out to be like all the rest, I'll just kill myself and be done with it, simple as that. Not like anyone would miss me, anyway. Issei looked at himself in the mirror and he wasn't shocked to see tears in his eyes. He started changing into his PJs and said no more. Raynare slid down the other side of the bathroom door, shocked. The doctor had been right. Issei was ready to end it all if she screwed it up. Issei thought he'd been talking to himself, but in reality Raynare could hear him clear as ever due to her enhanced senses as a fallen angel. Raynare touched her face and was surprised to feel hot tears falling down from her eyes. Could he really be so sad that he'd want to throw his life away? It made Raynare sick to think of someone as sweet and kind as him killing himself because the world did him wrong. She made up her mind. I'll protect him, I swear. I swear in my life that this boy will never be sad again. She was resolute. Nothing would harm him again, not if she could help it. She'd be his guardian angel, indeed. A few moments later, when Issei stepped out of the bathroom in black flannel pajamas, he was shocked to see Raynare, who was in nothing but a black silken nightgown. Why Uma-san? What are you wearing? He whispered at her. He blushed like mad and turned away as fast as he could. It made her smile, how innocent he was. So, she snuck up behind him while he turned away from her and hugged him from behind. He could very clearly feel two reasons why they shouldn't be hugging like that, but he couldn't even form words in his dot. What's wrong, Issei? You don't like it? She asked him, still hanging on his back. And no. It's not that I don't like it, you're beautiful, I can feel them, he managed to spit out. Raynare blushed. Raynare blushed harder than she ever had in her life. Her face turned scarlet red and she was pretty sure he could see it even with how dark it was, so she buried her face in his back. Do you really think I'm beautiful, Isay? She asked, softly. He stiffened and Lisa's advice from the car suddenly made sense to him. I do. You're gorgeous, I mean, not in a weird way, ugh. Yes, I think you're really pretty, Uma-san. His words made her face burn. If she was blushing before, her face was on fire, now. She let go of him, much to his relief, and turned away so he wouldn't see her face. Gee, good. I'm really glad you think so, Issei. Also, you already called me Uma in the hospital, so don't you dare start calling me Uma-san now. He sighed. Of course, Uma. Issei climbed on the couch. Raynare stopped before climbing on the bed. She decided to tease him some more. How are we going to sleep together on a couch? Wouldn't it be easier on the bed? Issei's face went beet red at her words. Sleep together, we met a day ago, we can't sleep together, he said, shocked that she'd even say something like that. She sighed and smiled. I guess you're right. Good night then, Issei. She laid down on his bed, her head facing where he was on the couch. Unbeknownst to her, Issei was having a mental battle with himself. It was his timidity versus his very rarely used bolder side, which had been enriched by Lisa's words. The bolder side won, and his hand snaked up to the bed from his spot on the couch. He intertwined his S with hers, shocking the fallen angel. She didn't resist, of course, and she gladly held his hand. They were both asleep in minutes. Read on. When Issei opened his eyes, all he saw was a wall of fire. A red and orange blaze, as far as the eye could see. Amidst the inferno, a large shape moved towards him, coming closer and closer. When it got far closer than Issei was comfortable with, the shape stopped. It twisted its form up, and what looked like it opened, then all Issei heard was a deafening roar. The top of the fire was blasted away by the sheer force of the roar, and Issei could see the head of the shape clearly. It was a large red western dragon. Not like a dragon from a kid's show, with cute eyes and a small visage. This dragon was huge and looked ready to kill at a moment's notice. Issei was terrified. He'd never seen something so frightening in his entire life. He moved to cover his face with his hands, only to realize he couldn't move them. His hands were firmly at his sides and refused to move. The rest of his body wouldn't budge either. All he could do was close his eyes and scream. To his surprise, he wasn't immediately eaten. Upon opening his eyes again, several minutes later, he saw the dragon laughing. The huge dragon was laughing his heart out, a thunderous and awe-inspiring sound. Issei was very confused and still extremely scared. He had no idea how to handle the situation. He didn't have to flounder for long. The dragon spoke up. "Hello, partner. Glad to see you've got such lively lungs. Where are your manners? Introduce yourself to your elders." The dragon boomed, hurting Issei's ears. The voice was so, Issei thought he'd have permanent hearing damage, but he answered in his normally timid way. I'm Issei, Haidu, your Majesty." He stuttered. The dragon was silent for a few seconds, as if measuring his response, and then he started laughing again, even harder than the first time. Issei was starting to get annoyed, really. Here he was, scared out of his mind, and this dragon was having the time of his life. "Your Majesty, wow, I have been called that since I still had a body. What a ride. Bwahaha. You're going to have fun, Issei Haidu, I can already tell." But the dragon moved uncomfortably close to Issei, putting his massive moride in front of Issei's face. "You're going to have to work on that timidity of yours. You have the power and soul of a dragon, act like it." The dragon shouted, far than he had earlier. He sounded almost angry. "Tell me, Issei. Don't you want to be powerful?" The dragon asked, almost in a nurturing tone. He awaited Issei's response. Issei nodded mutely. If he was powerful, no one could bully him ever again. No one would hurt him just for the pleasure of it. Not only that, but if he was powerful, he could protect the weak, like he wished so many times someone would for him. So, yes, he wanted power. He wanted it bad. "Then take it," the dragon said to Issei, quietly. The dragon stuck a huge clawed hand out of the fire, extending it towards Issei. Inside his palm was a growing crimson and green gauntlet. Issei thought it looked incredibly familiar, like an old friend. He rushed to take it, only for his body to refuse him yet again. "No, that's not right, my head was just moving. I just nodded. Why can't my body move?" he thought. He was being denied his chance for power, for a better life. He wanted more than anything to rush forward and take the power, just like Lisa had told him. He wanted it. He wanted it more than anything. But his body wouldn't move. Disappointing. I thought you of all people would want the power to change the world. Very well, no power for you. We'll try again some other time. The dragon closed his claws around the gauntlet and moved it back inside the fire. Issei was heartbroken. He'd had a chance to finally change his life for the better, and he couldn't even do it. He couldn't even move a muscle. Issei wanted to cry. Instead, he screamed. He kept screaming no. Over and over again, till long after the dragon had left, receded back into the fire. Soon, the dragon grew tired of it and stuck one clawed hand out of the fire. Issei watched as his hand grew closer and closer and impaled him through the dot. Issei opened his eyes and his vision swam. Fire lingered at the edges of his view, but soon dissipated. He was in a cold sweat and this felt raw. He realized he was staring into the face of a very concerned woman with raven hair and violent eyes, just like Yuma. But it wasn't Yuma. She had a more mature look and harder features. Issei thought she was very attractive, as much as Yuma even, but he was too confused to say anything about it. "Issei, are you okay? You just kept screaming and thrashing, and I couldn't get you to calm down, no matter what," the woman said, with a tear in her eye. She sounded like Yuma, too. "She sounds just like Yuma, who in the world is this, and why is she here?" Issei was truly confused. There was a beautiful woman standing over him, with tears in her eyes, asking if he was okay. Hadn't he just been dreaming? What was the dream about, again? Issei couldn't remember. Don't take this the wrong way, but who are you?" Issei asked, hesitantly. The woman looked confused by his words at first, but then began to panic. Issei grew more confused by the second. The woman ran her hands all over her face and began to freak out. No. This can't be happening. Raynare was thinking. She had let herself morph back into her true appearance during the night. Stupid. Now he'll hate me. She was thinking about all the ways this could turn out bad. He'd think she was ugly, or he'd figure out she'd been keeping secrets, or God forbid, he'd stop trusting her and kill himself. Raynare was so worried she felt sick. "Yuma? Is that you? I didn't realize that was how you looked without makeup. It really suits you, you look fantastic. I'd stop wearing makeup altogether if I were you." Issei murmured. He was still half asleep, so he probably didn't think about what he was saying. Raynare was so relieved she could cry. Of course Issei hadn't called her out on her suddenly changed appearance. Why would he? He was far too nice. He even thought she looked amazing. Raynare's heart was aflutter. She wanted to hug Isay until she suffocated him. She started laughing and fell on top of Isay. She hugged him violently, pressing her body into his. The boy was thrashing and half yelling about how they couldn't be doing this and he could feel them and other junk, but Raynare didn't care. Yes Isay. It's me. I thought you'd think I was ugly and I got so worried, she said quietly. The boy stopped flailing his arms and calmed down. He forced himself to breathe in and out, lowering his wild heart rate. Once again, Lisa's words echoed. Now, that girl out there is one of those dreams. Go take it. Isay exhaled slowly and replied to Raynare as calmly as he could. No, you're definitely not ugly. Far from it. At the risk of sounding like a jerk, I think you look better this way, he murmured, blushing and scratching his dot surprisingly. He didn't stutter or hesitate on even a single word. Raynare wanted to cry and laugh and sing and dance, all at the same time. She was absolutely giddy from his words. Not only did he think she looked great, she wouldn't have to hide her appearance anymore. Double win. She buried her face in his and snuggled closely to him. He let her, despite his better judgment, saying that this was a very indecent position for them to be in. Hey, I should tell my parents I'm here and introduce you, I guess, he said, hinting at her to get off of him. She hummed in agreement but didn't move. That means you've got to get off of me, he said quietly. No. You're warm and I'm cozy. I say we stay just like this. Raynare said, not moving even an inch. Isay sighed, blushing. He was still in pajamas and Raynare was only in a thin nightgown. There was very little between the two of them, in other words. While Isay did want to get up, he was, in fact, enjoying the contact. He hadn't had so much as a hug in years and he was a bit touch-starved. So, Raynare laying literally face down on top of him was a great feeling, but he knew it wasn't right. They hadn't even gone on a date and here they were laying together on the same couch. Indecent at the very least. Isay, let's chat for a while before we go talk to your parents. I want to know some more about you. Raynare said, drawing a circle on his with her dot. He was blushing even harder than before. While what they were doing might not have been a big deal for Raynare, this was by far the closest Isay had ever been to a member of the opposite and he was having trouble keeping his cool. What little cool he had anyway. The whole half-asleep bit was starting to wear off and the reality of the situation was setting in. He was starting to freak out a little. What do you want to talk about? He said. He wasn't adverse to conversation and he enjoyed talking whenever someone would actually listen. What were you dreaming about? You wouldn't stop screaming. I honestly got really worried. She said, looking up at him. She wasn't asking just for the sake of conversation, either. She'd heard the Longinus gear wielders normally have nightmares for quite some time before they finally awaken their sacred gears. She hoped that wasn't the case, because if Isay suddenly unlocked a Longinus gear, it would mean death for both of them. Him, for being a threat to Kakabiel, and her, for not eliminating him when she had a chance. I don't remember. There was fire, but I can't remember anything else. Just fire. Isay replied, trying to remember the details of the dream and failing each time. Well, that's a good sign. If all he saw was fire, it's probably not a Longinus gear. If it was, then it's just something like the Incinerate Anthem and Kakabiel wouldn't have to kill him for it. Weird. Okay, now you ask me a question. Anything you want. Raynare said. She was just glad he didn't dream of dragons or shadows or holy spears or anything like that. She didn't expect his next question at all. Why me? He asked, looking her in the eye. She tilted her head in confusion, not really understanding his question. He went on. Why did you ask out someone like me? A girl like you could have had any pick of guys, whoever you wanted. So, why me? What's so special about me? Isay asked. Not only did he not stutter or hesitate, he sounded almost angry. Raynare was visibly taken aback by his question. She'd expected something like why are you still on top of me? Or another pointless question like that, not something really meaningful. She didn't really have an answer and she doubted he'd be on board with the whole I was ordered to kill you, but I've fallen hopelessly in love with you line. As true as it was, it definitely wasn't something he needed to hear. Raynare didn't know what to say. So, she didn't say a thing. She leaned closer to Isay. And him. Isay had no idea what was going on. He'd lost all of his higher brain functions the moment her lips met his. That definitely wasn't the answer he was after, but it fit his question just the same. He knew, in that moment, that she wasn't just doing this to embarrass him, or to belittle him, or to hurt him. She really did love him. And here he was, trying to force her to admit she didn't. What a jerk. So, instead of pulling back, Isay took Lisa's advice in full. Raynare back, which shocked the angel arguably more than the initial shock to say. He wrapped his arms around her and pulled her as close as he could. A knock at the door grabbed their attention. Raynare quickly leapt off of Issei and he jumped off the couch. They both compassed themselves as fast as possible before whoever was there opened the door. The door turned and Issei's mother came through it. Issei's mother was a short woman, about 5'7", with long brown hair tied in a tight bun so none fell onto her face. She wore a tight and well-kempt dress suit, black with a grey skirt, and there was a cross necklace on her dot. She had small black glasses on, and they were on the bridge of her nose, rather than in front of her eyes. Issei's mom was the very dictionary definition of a strict-looking woman. Raynare was immediately on guard, as she didn't look like someone who'd be too happy about her son bringing home a girl. Issei immediately tensed up. Whatever this woman did to him, Raynare noticed, it left him on guard. As his mom opened the door and stepped into the room, she took in the situation. She wasn't pleased, and it showed. The look on her face was one of disgust. She looked back and forth between her son and the strange woman and made the sign of the cross. The action annoyed Raynare, but she noticed Issei was still on guard. Was she not going to hit him? Well, she probably wouldn't be with Raynare here. The woman walked to the pair and stopped just in front of them. She looked Raynare up and down, then turned to Issei, completely disregarding her. "Son, what is the meaning of this? You not only come home late from the hospital after getting in a fight, you bring home this whore. I'm disappointed. I'm sure the Lord is too," his mother said, not breaking her completely straight face. Issei looked down, ashamed. Raynare looked completely aghast. She'd been wrong. Both her and Dr. Lisa had been wrong. Issei's parents weren't abusive, they were just completely oppressive and rigid. No wonder Issei hated it here. The mother was stern as hell, and if Raynare had to guess, the father would be far worse. His mother continued, leaving no room for a reply. "Your father is downstairs, waiting for you. He's in his office, and I suggest you don't keep him waiting. But, I'd also suggest you make yourself decent." With that, she shot Raynare one last dismissive look and left. As soon as she closed the door behind her, Issei slumped down back onto the couch and sat with his head in his hands. Raynare rubbed his back, comforting him. "I knew they wouldn't be great, but wow. I'm a whore, huh? Ouch," Raynare said, thinking about the conversation. Issei didn't say anything. He just sat there, head in hands, thinking about how that went down. It actually went better than he expected it would, but to be personally reprimanded by his father had Issei terrified. He wouldn't be lenient. "Hey, Issei, it's okay," Raynare said. She crouched down, and he looked at her. His face was lined with sweat, and his eyes were wide. She knew her sentence was half-assed, but she was new to comforting people and frankly, she didn't know what to say. "You don't understand," he said, scared. "If you thought my mom was bad, wait till you see my dad. He's something else. Just no matter what they say, let me do the talking. They won't listen to you, because you're a woman." Wait, seriously? This family backwards? Wow. Raynare thought. They wouldn't listen to her, just because she's a chick. Yikes. She'd heard of families with strong religious roots being oppressive before, but this was like, stereotype level. "Okay, Issei. I trust you," she said, then she grabbed her bag that somehow Issei hadn't noticed her bring and excused herself to the bathroom to change. Issei changed in his room and knocked on the bathroom door to signal Raynare when he was decent. She walked out of the bathroom and they were both stunned. Issei was wearing a white long-sleeve, button-up shirt with a black tie and black slacks. He was neatly shaven and looked phenomenal. Wow, he cleans up nice. He was handsome before, but now he's kinda hot, Raynare thought, her fallen nature getting the better of her. In Issei's mind, he looked terrible, and Raynare eyeing him meant that she didn't like it. He didn't say anything about it, though, because he was too busy staring at her. Raynare was wearing a black dress suit with a black blazer and black tie, as well as a black skirt and heels. She had on a white undershirt as well. The clothes were normal enough, if a bit formal, but Issei was thunderstruck by her beauty. "Why you look," Issei trailing off mid-sentence. Raynare swished her dress around, teasing him. "You don't look half bad yourself, Issei. You look fancy, very nice," she said, looking him up and down with an approving gaze. It made Issei blush, like she was looking at a prime cut of meat. She was thinking about eating him, but not in the way he thought. They walked up to each other. Thanks. Our formal is casual, so this might not even cut it." "Well, we should go, let's get this over with. Please, just don't do anything rash. This is gonna be bad, and I don't want to make it worse." "Okay." She nodded. She didn't want to make things worse for him, either. They walked out of Issei's room and down the stairs. Raynare hadn't noticed it before, since it was dark, but the house was gorgeous. It was also spotless, eerily so. There wasn't a single thing misplaced, nor a single speck of dirt on their white carpets. It didn't look like a family lived there at all. It looked like a CEO's office would. Raynare was starting to get a better picture of Issei's home life with every minute she spent here. This must be awful. Such a strict household, I think I'd hate it here for sure. Hell, I already hate it here. I can only imagine how Issei feels. Raynare thought to herself as they walked into the lower part of Issei's house. As they entered the living room, they passed Issei's mother, who was reading the paper and drinking what Raynare could only assume was the blackest coffee ever poured. It stunk, and to Raynare's enhanced sense of smell, it was disgusting. She almost gagged. As they approached his mother, she gestured for them to go through a closed door to her side. As Issei approached the door, Raynare looked back at his mother. She was glaring at Raynare like she was a stain to be rid of. It made Raynare's skin crawl, but she dealt with it for Issei. If she made a scene, it wouldn't end well for anyone. Issei opened the door and they both stepped into what she guessed was his father's office. The room was extremely tidy and well kept, with not a single thing out on the lacquered wooden floor, save a desk, which Issei's father was sitting in. A grandfather clock ticked away in a corner and books lined shelves on the walls. Issei's father was obviously a stern man. His face was tight and unmoving, and his jaw was hard. He wore a brown suit and had thick glasses on his face. He looked down at a laptop seated on his hardwood desk and was typing something when the pair walked in. As they approached, Issei cleared his to catch his father's attention. The man looked up and displeasure briefly crossed his face. He was angry, though you probably couldn't tell from his face. Raynare stood still behind Issei, who was fidgeting and trembling. The boy was obviously terrified, but that didn't seem to faze his father. Issei Haidu. I have an adequate excuse for not only getting home late but getting into a fight and bringing home some harlot. The man said, briefly glancing at Raynare, who didn't react to the comment. WWW was. I see you still have that pathetic stutter. Fine, don't talk, just listen. The father said and leaned back in his chair. Issei hung his head in shame at not being able to formulate a sentence. Raynare grew angrier by the second. They could treat her however, sure, but their own son. You got into a fight. You went to the hospital without our knowledge, then arrived home at an ungodly hour. Not only did you bring this woman into our home without my knowledge or permission, you slept with her. And no, Issei started to say something to deny his father's accusation, but he was interrupted. I don't want to hear it. We have tried and tried and tried to raise you right, but it seems like the devil is a bit too strong in you. You're too much for us to handle, and you're bringing disgrace on our family name. Issei shook his head but didn't say anything. Raynare was reaching her limit. She was seething, and every word out of the father's was like nails on a chalkboard to her. How dare he talk down to his own flesh and blood like that? Despicable. You recently turned 17. You're old enough to strike out on your own. Issei's father said. Issei's eyes went wide and he started shaking his head rapidly. And no, he murmured. Issei's world was spinning. He felt sick to his stomach. Issei Haidu. You've been an embarrassment and a burden to this family since the day we adopted you. The father said, without remorse. Raynare gaped. Of course he was adopted. No wonder he's so alone, these aren't even his real parents. But then what happened to them and why was Issei stuck here? No, please don't do this to me. Issei said, raising his voice. Raynare grew increasingly worried. She hadn't pieced together what the father was getting at yet, but she knew it must be bad if Issei was actually yelling. Issei, I'm disowning you. You'll find 30 million yen in your bank account. That should be more than enough to buy your own house. Take what you need from your room and never come back here. That's all. His father looked back down at his computer, completely dismissing Issei. The boy was shaking. Tears fell from his eyes. His hands clenched into fists and he was struggling to stay on his feet. Raynare's fists were clenched too, but for entirely different reasons. She was pissed. Raynare had been mad before. When she fell, there was one time. When she saved Issei from Mitsuda, that was another. But now, she was seeing red and trying to resist impaling Issei's pathetic excuse for a stepfather right where he sat. She wouldn't do anything rash, but she would speak her mind, Issei's request be damned. You're pathetic. Raynare said, walking up till she stood right in front of the man's desk. He looked up at her with a surprised look on his face, like he was flabbergasted that she could even talk. You have no right to speak to me as such in my own house. You played a part in corrupting him, I'd wager, so don't try to speak to me like you're some kind of angel. The father looked back down, dismissing her entirely. It only made her angrier. She raised her hand to slap him. Sure, it wasn't the best course of action, but it would give them both some satisfaction, at least. She swung her hand at him. He looked up with an uncaring look on his face. Issei caught Raynare's arm, preventing her from hitting his ex-stepfather. She turned back to look at him and saw that his hair was covering his eyes, but the tears had stopped flowing down his face. Issei looked mad, not scared. The man chuckled, surprising both of them. You need to put a tighter leash on your slut girlfriend, Isay. She shouldn't be raising her hand against a man. He said, sinking back in his chair. Raynare sneered but didn't move closer. She didn't have to. Isay lunged forward and punched the pathetic man in his face, sending him sprawling from his chair. Raynare gasped. That wasn't at all what she expected, but she was glad it happened. The man deserved that and more. Don't talk about her like that. I've only known her for a few days and she's already done more for me than you ever have. Isay growled. Raynare wasn't sure where this side of him had come from, but she definitely liked it. Standing up for her and himself, all in one move. Amazing. She was falling for him harder and harder every time he opened his dot. Isay's father slowly picked himself up. His glasses were cracked in one, but he put them back on his face anyway. He laughed again. I'll give you that one, I suppose. You only proved my point. Now leave, before I call the police. He said and made a gesture towards the door behind them. Isay grabbed Raynare's hand and quickly retreated from the room. She followed close behind him, hurrying to keep up. His mother was nowhere to be seen when they left the office and they hurried up to Isay's room. Isay opened the door to let Raynare in, then followed behind her. As soon as they were both inside, Isay closed the door behind them and collapsed against it, sliding down. He started sobbing and Raynare was at his side instantly. They both sat on the ground for several minutes, Raynare just holding his hands in hers before either of them said anything. When one of them did speak up, it was Raynare. Isay, I'm sorry. She said. He sniffled and looked at her, wondering what she meant. For what I meant what I said there, by the way, he said, quietly. This is all my fault. If I hadn't come home with you, this wouldn't have happened. She said, truly sorry. He didn't quite see it the same way. He sighed and after a moment he replied. No, it still would have happened. It might not have happened then, but it would have happened. I'm just not meant to have a family, I guess. Isay said. His stutter was gone. He was too emotionally defeated to care about how he sounded or what he said. He was broken. Raynare, too, was hurting. Not because of what his stepdaughter said to her, she really didn't care, but because of what Isay had to go through. Whatever happened to his real parents obviously scared him, and then he had to go and live with these human garbage bags for however long. The poor boy. Isay, that's not true. I promise you'll have a family of your own one day and they'll love you forever. These people aren't even worth your time. Raynare said and hugged him. He kept crying. Hey Uma. I have a weird question, Isay asked, slowly. He didn't mess up a single word, but his voice was thick with sadness. Yes, Isay. You can ask me anything, I promise. She said. She held his hands firmly, like he'd run off if she gave him half a chance. He traced circles on the back of her hands, like she'd done with him before. It gave them both a small amount of comfort. Do you think God is real? He asked. His hair still covered his eyes and she couldn't tell what he was thinking. Obviously she knew God was real, she'd seen him before. He was dead now, but Isay definitely didn't need to know that. I do, Isay. What makes you ask that? She was almost afraid of his answer. What could make him ask something like that? She desperately hoped he wasn't thinking of suicide again. If there really is a God, why is my life so horrible? It's not like I haven't prayed or asked for salvation. Why couldn't he just help me or send me an angel or something? Isay asked, more talking to himself than her at this point. His voice made her sad beyond belief. Oh, Isay. He already has, you just don't know it yet. Raynare thought. She almost considered just showing Isay her wings right then and there, just to comfort him. She quickly dismissed the idea, though. He probably wouldn't react well. She wasn't absolutely sure that was what he needed, not yet. Maybe you do have a guardian angel, Isay. Maybe her name is Raynare or something and she's closer than you think. Raynare said. She was getting dangerously close to revealing the truth, but she didn't care. This boy needed some hope, or love, or something. Isay gave a dry laugh. Is that so? Well, I must make her job pretty hard. I hope she has black wings instead of white. Are they even white? Who cares, angels probably don't exist anyway. God, I'm a mess. He rambled, not even caring what came out of his anymore. Raynare almost wanted to laugh. Black wings instead of white, huh? Well, I've got just what the doctor ordered. She thought. If she doubted Isay was perfect for her before, she knew he was now. She made her choice. Angels don't exist, huh? Be careful, Isay. You'll hurt my feelings. Please don't hate me, she thought. Raynare unfurled her wings. Isay couldn't talk. His wouldn't form words. Raynare crouched in front of him and behind her two jet black angel wings. Isay reached a trembling hand out to touch them. His mind started connecting the dots, even though he hadn't caught up yet. Her appearance had suddenly changed after sleeping. She totally manhandled Mitsuda, despite his bigger size and greater strength, paying for his hospital bill by herself, despite being a student and the fact that she had literal wings. Yes, there was no way she was a mundane human. So Raynare, huh? Is that your real name? Issei asked quietly, not trusting his own voice. He touched her feathered wings and was delighted by how soft they were. She nodded mutely. Raynare wanted to cry, she was so stressed. Was this the right thing to do? How would he react? Would he hate her now? It wasn't too late if she just used some hypnotism. No, she made her choice. She had to stick with it no matter what. Even if he hated her, so be it. This had to happen eventually, so she might as well have done it now. Isay ran his hand down the length of her right wing. It was as soft as silk. You're an angel, Isay said softly. Raynare bit her lip. He did hate her, didn't he? How could he not? She'd been keeping a secret from him this whole time, even after she asked for his trust. Not just one secret, either. She wondered how he'd react if he knew she was originally supposed to kill him. Probably not well. Please don't hate me, Raynare said, shaking. Isay scoffed at her words. Hate you? How could I ever live with myself if I hated my angel? Isay said. He picked up his head and looked her in the eyes. She was on the verge of tears. His face was red and his eyes were puffy, but no tears fell. He was out of tears. He took both her hands in his, surprising her. Isay, she said, afraid of what he would do next. Would he tell her to leave, maybe get mad at her for lying to him? She wasn't ready. She didn't want to leave him. She started to tear up. At that moment, she wasn't an angel, or a fallen angel, or anything supernatural. She was a girl in love, afraid of her soulmate leaving her. Isay realized how scared she was. So, he didn't hesitate at all when he leaned forward towards her. Raynare's mind went blank. She was so stunned that even after he pulled back, she almost didn't even register his next words. No, Raynare. How could I ever hate you? You're the only one I have left. Even before I knew you had wings, you were my angel. You could have sprouted frog legs and a lion's mane, and you'd still be the girl who saved me. Raynare started smiling, then she started laughing, and then she started crying. She threw her arms around him, and she cried. He rubbed her back with one hand and put the other one on her head, trying to comfort her. She laughed in between sobs. He wasn't really sure how to handle the situation, but he knew he was done being scared. Isay, you're the best. I love you. She said, in between her happy tears. She didn't care anymore. He was hers, and she was his. Isay couldn't say it at first. He choked on the words. He steeled himself and powered through. If he had anything to say about it, he'd never stutter again. He'd leave it behind, just like his ex-family. I love you too, Raynare. He said. They sat there, hugging, for quite some time. They were both shrouded by her wings, and Isay enjoyed every second of it. The door to his room tried to open, but they were still on the ground in front of it. Isay. You've got 10 minutes. Collect your things and leave, already. His mother's voice said through the door. Isay sighed. He'd almost forgotten his situation, for a minute there. His head fell back against the door. Raynare withdrew her wings. Isay's brown hair shrouded his face, and she wasn't sure what he was feeling until she saw a single tear slip down to his. Raynare huffed. No. No, 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 no. You're never allowed to be sad again. Raynare declared, and she wiped the tear off his face and the hair out of his eyes, revealing his defeated expression. He chuckled, dimly. But, Raynare, I've got no home. No family. Nowhere to go. She glared at him, making him wonder what he said wrong. It didn't take long for him to figure out his misstep. Well, I guess that's not entirely true, is it? He said, wiping off his face. She tilted her head and made a face that said keep going. So, he did. I do have a family and she's got awesome black wings. He said, smiling brightly. She didn't say anything for a few seconds and it made Isay second guess what he said. Was that too corny? He asked, starting to feel embarrassed. She couldn't take it anymore. Raynare squealed, startling Isay. She practically leapt at him and wrapped him in the tightest hug he'd ever had. Isay hissed in pain, making Raynare recoil. She had a remorseful look on her face and scratched the back of her head sheepishly. Sorry, everything that's happened, I almost forgot you were hurt, she said, apologetic. It's fine. Honestly, I forgot too. I'm not really feeling all that hurt. See? Isay stood up from his place on the ground and stretched various ways, showing that he was fine. Raynare stood up soon after him. That's great. Whatever Dr. Lisa did to you must have been top-notch work. Raynare said. MMHM. Well, I guess I should get my stuff. I bet I can still find a hotel room, Isay said, and began absent-mindedly throwing clothes and books into a suitcase he'd had ready by his bed. Why did you have a suitcase ready? Raynare asked. She stood by the door and watched him collect his things, ready to close it if the mom tried to come in again. He answered her without looking away from his bookshelf. He was trying to find a book but couldn't seem to locate it. I always knew I'd have to go at some point, I guess. I didn't think I'd literally be kicked out, but I guess it doesn't matter. He said. Ah, there it is. He snapped his S and pulled a hardback copy of a dictionary of angels, including the fallen ones. He flashed the title at her, showing what he found. See if you're in here. He crossed the room and handed it to her, and she opened the book with hesitation. Raynare looked at the book with some skepticism. Would it have her in there? She was one of the original angels, but she'd hardly done anything noteworthy. If she was, it'd be under her angel name, not her fallen name. Rachiel. Oh, hey. I am here. It's my angel name, though, not the one you know me by. Or either of the ones you know me by. She handed him the open book and pointed to a description. Isay took it and looked at the passage, reading intently. Rachiel, one of the angelic luminaries concerned with human quality. In Barrett, the Magus 11, Rachiel is one of the 3 angels of Friday. Also, one of the presiding spirits of the planet Venus according to the secret grimoire of Turiel. Isay nodded, absorbing the information. He only had one question at present. What in the world does it mean when it says you're an angel of Friday? He asked, looking up from the book. Raynare looked like she didn't know what he was talking about and he pointed to the line in the large book. It does say that I have no idea. Humans come up with some weird stuff, I guess. Though, the rest of this is pretty accurate. I was one of the angels presiding over quality, though that's not really how the system works anymore. Can you tell? Raynare said and gestured towards herself, or more specifically, to her. Isay looked away, sporting a healthy blush. Yeah. Anyway, I think I'm just about ready to go. Isay lifted the handle on his suitcase and rolled it towards the door. He'd taken a few books, a few sets of clothes, and all his necessary items from his bathroom. Just as he was about to open the door to leave, he snapped his S. Ah. How could I forget my most prized possession? He went into his closet, which Raynare hadn't seen opened until now, and retrieved something. When he came out, he was holding a small red wooden box, covered with soft white cloth. Raynare looked in confusion at the box, which was giving off a faint holy aura. Isay probably had no idea, but whatever was in that box was most likely a holy relic or enchanted item. What is that? Raynare asked, curious. I can feel the aura from here. Isay looked apprehensive. He didn't really want to open the box. Not because he didn't want to show her what was inside, he wouldn't have gotten out if he didn't, but because the latch on the box was tough to open and he always had trouble with it. He didn't want to embarrass himself by failing to open a box in front of Raynare. A ring, actually, Isay said, given to me by my mother, my real mother, before she passed away. She said it would protect me in times of need. I think this is a time of need, considering everything. He said and removed the cloth from around the cherrywood box. He began trying to open the box, but couldn't get the latch to come loose. He tried harder. Raynare watched with a smirk while he struggled to open the small box. He was red in the face from trying so hard and was obviously exerting himself a bit too much to be healthy. Almost there, I think, he said, pulling as hard as could. He hissed as he lost his grip and he cut his hand on the latch, dropping the box on the floor. A scratch appeared on his and a drop of blood landed on the latch. Suddenly, the latch opened itself, just like clockwork. Air hissed out of the box, like it had been far too long since it was opened. Raynare shuddered as the holy aura hit her full force. It was potent and felt ancient. Whatever Isay had in there was precious. Ah, see? All part of the plan. He said, waving his cut hand around in the air and picking up the box with his other hand. He opened the lid and took out a plain golden ring with a small, flat black pearl set in the center. The ring was obviously extremely old, indicated by the dull color of the gold. It was a simple double-banded gold ring, with no defining features other than the black pearl at the center. Etched on the surface of the pearl was a seal in the shape of a hexagram. Isay, that's a very old holy relic. I don't know what exactly, but it's practically dripping with power. Where did your mom get that, exactly? Raynare asked, looking hard at the ring. Try as she might, she couldn't figure out the purpose of the seal. It was an extremely complex emblem, but the basis of it was demon sealing. It was so advanced, she had no idea of the actual function of the ring. She was a treasure hunter. I assume she found it during one of her and my father's expeditions, but I'm not sure. I actually had several cool artifacts, but most of them were repossessed by my stepparents when I moved in. That sword on the mantle in the living room, for one. Isay said. Sword? She hadn't even noticed one. On the bright side, if she didn't notice it, that meant it probably wasn't a holy sword or relic, so no one would come looking for it. That's amazing. So why didn't they take the ring? I mean, I'm glad they didn't, but that seems like something they'd want. Raynare asked, admiring the beautiful artifact. Strange seal or not, it was gorgeous. Well, I'm sure they would've if they knew I had it. I never let them see the box. It's very precious to me, so they wouldn't have been able to take it regardless. I wouldn't let them. Issei said. He pulled the ring from the box and slipped it on his. Nothing changed, to Raynare's relief. It's good luck, I think. Mom wouldn't have given it to me if it was something dangerous. She was a pacifist. It can't be anything too bad. He said, admiring how the ring looked on his. He clapped his hands together and went back to his suitcase. Well, that's that, I guess. The rest of my artifacts aren't anything special, at least, not that I know of. My ex-step-parents can have what's left. Issei rolled his suitcase out the door and down the stairs to the living room. Raynare followed close behind him. When they reached the living room, she looked at the mantel of the fireplace and sure enough, there was a beautiful sword sitting horizontally across it. She felt an extremely faint holy aura, but nothing even worth noting. A priest had probably blessed it at some point. They passed Issei's mother on the way out of the house. She was shooting them both a smug grin, like she'd won a game they'd been playing. Just you wait, bitch. I'll be back in a second. Raynare thought to herself, plotting. They left the house and stepped onto the driveway, Issei rolling his large suitcase behind him. So, where to now? Issei said, looking back at Raynare. She looked back at the house and patted her pockets like she was trying to find something. Oh, I forgot something. I'll go grab it really quick, be right back. Raynare said and dashed back into the house. Rayo, okay. Issei said, reaching his hand out. She was inside before he could even offer to help her find whatever it was. He stood out on the driveway for a good 5 minutes and was just about to go back inside when Raynare came back out, holding her bag. Issei hadn't seen her bring it with them from the hospital and could only assume it had something to do with her being an angel. Okay, I'm good. I called Lisa too. Raynare said, walking up to Issei. He looked surprised. Did angels really use phones? What did you talk about? Issei asked, curious. I asked her if she knew a good place to go. She said that she has an empty penthouse apartment that would be perfect for us to use. It's even pretty close to your school. Raynare said. She took Issei's free hand in hers. That's great. Is she going to drive us or should we start walking? Issei asked. He really didn't want to walk with hurt ribs. While he was feeling much better, he definitely didn't want to risk damaging anything else. I've got that covered. Don't freak out. Raynare said and suddenly the two of them were outside a large apartment building all the way across town. Why would I freak? Issei stopped mid-sentence as he realized they just teleported. That's insane. He said, amazed. He had his suitcase and everything and people walked all around them, either not noticing or not caring about the sudden appearance. Raynare led the way and the two went into the building. They took an elevator up to the highest floor, the 20th story, and went into the nice hallway. There was an access code to get into the door, but Raynare put it in easily, like she'd lived there her whole life. She opened the door and they both walked in. The room was extremely nice and well furnished. The ceiling was high, despite being an apartment, and the walls were white and black. The whole room gave off a modern vibe, which they both liked. There were 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, but they both put their things inside the master bedroom. Despite it being someone else's property, there was nothing in any of the drawers or dressers for closets, like it had never even been lived in. They'd been sitting in the kitchen of the apartment for about a minute, figuring out where things were, when the door opened and Lisa stepped inside. Hello. You both sure got here fast. Do you like the place? Of course you do, you're young, and it's modern. What's the word nowadays, chic? Something like that. Well, don't just sit there, talk to me. Lisa said, chuckling softly. As she talked, she walked to where they were in the kitchen and sat down with them at the bar. Hi Lisa. Thanks for letting us stay here. Issei said, politely. She laughed. Think nothing of it. I have houses and apartments all over the world, consider this one yours. I mean it, too. It's yours. She said, she got serious and looked Issei in the eyes. Issei, you filled me in. Your stepmonsters kicked you out on your own. I'm giving you this place. It's paid for completely, you don't have to keep up with rent or bills or anything. Just make sure to keep it tidy, Lisa said and tousled Issei's hair. He smiled brightly. Thank you so much. He said and bowed to her. Raynare bowed, following his lead. She waved them off. Don't worry about it. Now, how are those ribs treating you? Raynare stepped back inside the house. She told Issei she forgot something and she had forgotten her bag, but in reality she wanted his step-parents to pay for making his life miserable. So, she'd hit them where it hurts. Issei's mother came to see why they'd come back inside, only to be greeted by Raynare. What do you want, harlot? Why are you here? The mother said, narrowing her eyes. You believe in God, right? What about angels? Raynare said. She clenched and unclenched her hands, trying to keep herself calm. This dirtbag of a human had made Issei's life horrible. Not to mention she'd insulted Raynare several times during her time here. So, Raynare would make her pay, naturally. And to do it, she'd use the woman's religious beliefs against her. Of course I believe in God. And as for angels, they're God's tools for righteousness and love. They should be worshipped just like him. Issei's mother said and rubbed the cross on her neck. She was starting to get a bad feeling about this. I agree completely. So, you'd do anything an angel told you to? Raynare said and stepped closer. The woman backed up despite herself. Oh, of course I would. Now what do you want? Leave, before I call the cops. She said and pointed at Raynare. Raynare smirked. She unfurled her wings, reveling in the woman's shocked reaction. As she approached Issei's stepmom, the woman fell to the ground and began to pray furiously. She started to cry as Raynare grew closer. Not out of fear, but out of repentance. She was guilty. Raynare looked down at her and pulled up the woman's face so she'd look her in the eyes. Go in there and use that sword you stole from Isay to kill your husband, then call the police and turn yourself in. Do so, and I will spare your soul the fires of hell. Raynare said and threw the woman backwards onto the floor. Could Raynare spare the woman from hell? Not even almost. She wasn't even a heavenly angel. By the time it took Raynare to go grab her bag from Issei's room upstairs, the woman had already retrieved the sword and made her way into the office. Raynare didn't need enhanced hearing to hear the screams. Serves them right. Now Issei's free. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the Belial the Liar for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.